I really like Hearthstone. It's a game I've been playing for a long time. I started playing it in the early closed beta. And it's a game that I want to make a lot more content about. I really want to get into Hearthstone content creation as kind of a secondary game that I'm gonna do on my channel. Dota is still gonna be my main thing, but I also want to do a lot of Hearthstone. That's not going to take anything away from the Dota stuff. It's just gonna be a new little thing I want to explore. And so I thought, let's go ahead and start exploring that in the new expansion in Journey to Un'Goro. And what thing to best start out with, other than a card set review. Since you guys don't know anything about how good I am, I guess now you can form that opinion. And yeah, so how is this gonna go? I am going to go through all of the cards that are currently announced. I'm going to give you my opinions on it, and I'll let you know what I think, like how much play will this see, what is this going to be good for, and all of that. We're gonna start with the neutral cards, then we're gonna go into the class cards. And whenever we are talking about a class, I want to talk about the class's quest first, as long as that is available. And, then go from there, since I think the quest is really one of the main things in this expansion that is really going to have a big, significant impact. Let's get started with Tar Creeper, a 3-mana 1/5 with taunt and +2 attack on your opponent's turn. I think this card is just fundamentally amazing, really, really good. It's also an elemental, which works well with all of the new elemental mechanics. It has great stats. It's essentially a cheaper Sentient Shield Master in a lot of circumstances. If you're playing against an aggro deck, Tar Creeper is just going to be fantastic, especially in the new expansion. A lot of decks are trying to be a little bit slower, since you have the quests, you have the new legendaries and all of that stuff. And that's something that always happens with every single expansion. Everybody's always talking about, well, Hearthstone will be slower now, right? The game will finally be at a slower pace where you no longer have to, just worry about dying on turn 2. However, every single time that doesn't end up being true. Hearthstone has always been getting faster and faster and faster. So I think at this stage, we can safely assume that even though we're looking at this expansion as something where, hey, maybe this time, finally, control will take over, that is just kind of an unrealistic assumption, because that has never happened in the history of Hearthstone. As such, I expect the Tar Creeper to be very powerful, since there will still be Pirate Warrior running around, Patches is still in the game. The biggest offender if it comes to hyper-aggressive decks is of course Pirate Warrior, and Pirate Warrior doesn't lose that much in the rotation. So you need something to deal with Pirate Warrior, else you'll still die on turn 4. I think Tar Creeper is a really good way of doing that. Tar Creeper should be able to buy you a lot of space. However, it isn't flawless. Tar Creeper does have a weakness in being a card where your opponent is in complete control and you yourself can't really do that much, since you can't really trade that efficiently on your turn, but they have, the option of, okay, you know what, we're just going to wait, since he can't do anything on his turn, and then set up our board and then deal with it once we can deal with it easily, once we can deal with it with getting the most benefit out of it, and not necessarily run all of our small minions into it, so, the Tar Creeper gets a lot of value. So that's something that's a little bit of a downside to it. However, I expect Tar Creeper to be very powerful. The next card is a 2-mana 2/3 Golekka Crawler, Battlecry Destroyer, Pirate in game +1/+1. It's a beast, which is already nice. It's just, like a hungry crab kind of thing, except instead of being a Murloc, it's a pirate. I think this card is very powerful. As I already mentioned, I think Pirate Warrior will still be a thing. This deals with Pirate Warrior, which is nice. If you can eat one of those 3-mana 3/4 pirates, then you essentially win the game right there. I think this card is going to be very powerful. It will see play in certain decks. However, I think those decks will most likely be either at very high legend, where you can somehow predict what you're playing against, or in tournaments. In just a regular ladder setting, I could see a one-off of this card in Reno decks, but with Reno rotating out, I expected to maybe be a Kazakus Priest left, but I don't see any hope for Warlock or Mage. And as such, maybe a one-off in Kazakus Priest, I could definitely see that. However, without Reno, without the one-off archetype, this card is probably not going to have a space in just a regular ladder deck. In a tournament setting, however, I thoroughly expect this card to see play. Absolutely. I think this will be a very common tech card if you expect to play against Pirate Warrior, which, as I already mentioned, I still think is going to be a thing. But yeah, this card I think has very much potential. Another thing to keep in mind here is Reno doesn't disappear. Reno just goes to Wild, which means that Reno decks will still exist in Wild, and for example Reno Warlock or Reno Mage still exist in Wild, just like Pirate Warrior will still exist in Wild. And in that scenario, I think we'll likely see a Golakka Crawler as a one-off in those decks, because I think this crab actually works really, really well in Reno decks. It's not terrible to just play it on turn 2. It's really not. It feels fine. It's a 2-mana 2/3. You aren't super happy about it, but it's going to be sticky enough to actually fight a little bit. And it's not terrible, right? It's a perfectly fine card. I think Golakka Crawler is going to be a niche tech card that will still see a reasonable amount of play. And if there is a Priest Reno archetype surviving, like if one of those survives the rotation, then I almost expect this to be a card that we'll see there rather frequently. The next card is a 4-mana 5/4 Gentle Megasaur. Battlecry, adapt your Murlocs. I assume when you play this card, you do adapt once, and then all of your Murlocs get that adaptation. This card, I don't think is very good. It's a win more mechanic. If you have a bunch of Murlocs in play, you play this guy, and then your Murlocs are more powerful. However, I mean, if you have a bunch of Murlocs in play, you're probably already winning, and you just want to focus on killing the guy. However, if you don't have a bunch of Murlocs in play, you're trying to play an aggressive deck, 4-mana 5/4 is just not good, right? It's just not good enough. And as such, I don't know if this card will see a lot of play, especially considering that currently it's looking like the only viable Murloc deck left will be a Murloc Shaman, and the Murloc Shaman has Bloodlust, which Bloodlust to me seems just like a better card than this, since with Bloodlust you can guarantee to push for damage, and pushing for damage is likely what you want to do with an aggressive Murloc deck. So yeah, I don't really believe in the Gentle Megasaur. Elise, the Trailblazer. A 5-mana 5/5, shuffle a sealed Ungoro pack into your deck. This card will see play, I have no doubt about it. 5-mana 5/5 is fine in terms of stats, right? It's not the dream, but actually, traditionally speaking, 5-mana cards often tend to not have that great of stats. The 5-mana slot, traditionally speaking, is usually occupied by some very niche things. Most commonly, Azure Drake, which is a card we have now lost in the rotation, which is, of course, gonna be something that has a huge impact on the game. However, Elise is a card where I think it's certainly going to find a home in various control decks. I'm not sure what kind of control decks will exist, of course. I would expect there to be a one-off of this card in Kazakus Priest, since, again, I kind of think that archetype may survive, right? But Kazakus Priest I can definitely see running a one-off of Elise, maybe some sort of Warrior. I don't know, Warrior hasn't been controlling for a little while now, which is kind of a shame. I love Control Warrior. I actually got my Golden Warrior using Control Warrior. Now everybody thinks I just got it with Pirates. Man, that's really upsetting. I've Golden Warrior with Control Warrior, but no, Pirates. Anyway, the Sealed Ungoro pack is a 2-mana card that adds 5 Journey to Ungoro cards to your hand. These 5 Journey to Ungoro cards are random, however they are weighed in favor of legendary cards. As the developer for Hearthstone put it, these cards, or like Elise, is very lucky. And as such, she tends to get legendary cards. Legendary cards, of course, tend to be really powerful, which this is a nice mechanic for a control deck that is just looking for a little bit more steam to actually finish the game. A lot of control decks in Hearthstone tend to just run out of steam. They don't have any proper finishers, especially now that Power Overwhelming is also leaving. Now Control Warlock loses the Leroy Power Overwhelming combo. You have Emperor Forison leaving. Again, a lot of combo potential that allowed for kills gone. There for a little while there was this Control Warrior combo archetype deck thing, where essentially you tried to use Bran with the Murloc draw 2 cards and the card Violet Illusionist, which made you immune in your turn, to just kind of like burn your opponent deep into fatigue and kill them that way. All of that is gone now because with Forison and Bran and all of that leaving, I think control decks will actually be lacking just in terms of kill potential to some extent. Yes, quests will help, but I expect Elise to see play at least early on in the expansion. She may vanish later on when the decks become more optimized and such, but early on Elise will certainly find a home in a lot of decks, and especially in that Kazakus Priest. I personally am going to put a one-off of Elise in, because she has nice solid stats for 5 mana. She feels good to play for 5 mana, and then later on you'll get your Journey to Ungoro pack, which gives you some more value out of her. There's a small one, Firefly, 1 mana, 1/2, Battlecry, add a 1/2 elemental into your hand. It's an elemental. This card will see play in elemental decks, since the elemental mechanic is based on playing an elemental ahead of time, right? Firefly is fantastic because you can use it twice for that effect. You play Firefly once, and then next turn you can trigger your big elemental effect, and then you still have a Firefly left, which you can use to trigger an elemental effect in a later turn. This, I think, will almost certainly see play in a lot of elemental decks. It is a nice card to play on turn 1 as well. It's a 1/2, which is fine. It's not the dream by any means, but it feels alright. It's just a card that I think is reasonable. Will likely see some play early on in the expansion. May again vanish later on when decks become more optimized, and depending on whether or not the elemental mechanic ends up being all that powerful, that's another question we'll have to answer at a certain point. But I think Firefly in elemental decks is actually quite powerful. Next up is a 4 mana 3/5 Tolria Stone Shaper. If you've played an elemental last turn, gain Taunt and Divine Shield. Again, this is one of those cards where it is based on you having played an elemental the turn beforehand, but isn't an elemental himself. And that is kind of an important thing to keep in mind here. Now, with the elemental mechanic, of course, the dream would be you play an elemental, buffing up the next card you play, which gains the bonus, but is an elemental itself. But it doesn't really work out that way, right? If you could just do that, then you could just have, the dream curve of elementals, and you just win for free, and I'm really hoping that they are moving away a little bit from Curse Stone. So Tolria Stone Shaper is of course incredible if you get to fulfill the condition. It is kind of shit if you don't. This card I expect to see somewhat occasionally, maybe in elemental decks. I'm really unsure how to judge this one in particular, because it really depends on if you can squeeze in an elemental the turn beforehand. Let's say you have the Firefly, right, and you play Shaman, for example. Then on turn 3 you can Hero Power and play the Firefly. In turn 5 you play the Tolria Stone Shaper. Honestly, that doesn't sound that bad, right? That sounds reasonable. Later on in the game, of course, it's very powerful. We already know that having a Taunt and Divine Shield combination is probably one of the strongest keyword combinations in the game. However, again, fulfilling the condition is always going to be tricky, especially this early on in the game. A card that I think might see play, although it's going to be a little bit tricky to properly predict. If you can consistently fulfill the condition, then yes, that is a guarantee, I think, right? Like, if it is possible to frequently, consistently hit that elemental on turn 3, so you can play him on turn 4, yes, incredible card in that circumstance. If you can't, it's going to be just probably a no. Gluttonous Ooze, a 3 mana 3/3, destroy your opponent's weapon and gain armor equal to its attack. Another card to counter Pirate Warrior. Will probably be a one-off in Kazakus Priest, a one-off in a lot of control decks. Definitely better than just the Ooze, right? The 2 mana 3/2. Because from my experience, more often than not, you don't actually want to play the Ooze on turn 2. It's just the best weapon removal, right? You of course have the Harrison Jones, but Harrison Jones is a 5 mana card, which 5 mana is often too late. Right, so 5 mana is too late and 2 mana is too early. So a 3 mana that not only kills the weapon, but also gives you armor, which is health, as like a reward for it, that is really good. On top of that, it's a 3 mana 3/3, which is perfectly fine. Nice stats. This card will see play in decks that are trying to deal with Pirate Warrior, which again, I still expect to be a thing. And as such, it will likely pop up here and there. I'm a little annoyed that it's an epic. I gotta admit, I don't really think this card should be an epic, because it will be kind of an essential of the metagame for a while. And as such, I don't know, I wish it had a lower rarity, but oh well. But yeah, Gluttonous Ooze is a definite yes from me. We've got Osrook, a 9 mana 5/5 legendary, has Taunt and Battlecry, gain +5 health for each elemental you played last turn. This card is not good. It may see occasional play in elemental decks, but I honestly don't see that happening. The meta needs to be incredibly slow for this card to actually be worth it. And by incredibly slow, I mean really, really slow. The 9 mana 5/9 that had Taunt and was untargetable by spells and hero powers didn't see play. This card is a 9 mana, most likely a 9 mana 5/10 in most circumstances, that can just get hexed. This card can maybe see play in tournament, where if you are going up against a control deck and you know it, you can try to bait out their removal and then, play all of your elementals on turn 8, and then turn 9 you just play a huge Osrook, a 520 Osrook, sorry. You play a 520 Osrook, that could happen, I guess, and in that circumstance the card will be very powerful. But honestly, in most cases, you will get to play this guy on turn 9 as a 5/10, which is a worse Ancient of War, and then he gets hexed. And that's gonna be the end of him. This card, I don't believe him. I just don't. The strongest part of the card, I think, is that it's an elemental that has the benefit of, using elemental things, which is always really powerful. As we know of dragon decks, in a dragon deck, a dragon that benefits from other dragons is very powerful. The same benefit applies to Osrook, but again, this card, I think, will very likely just be bad. Sorry. 3 mana 3/2 Primal Fin, look out, a Murloc Battlecry if you control another Murloc. Discover a Murloc. This card will not see play. Maybe in Murloc Shaman. It's very unlikely though. It is a card that is too high on the mana cost. If it was a 2 mana 3/2 with the same effect, I could see it. However, as a 3 mana 3/2, it will not feel good to play on curve. And even if you can discover a Murloc, I mean, there's a lot of bad Murlocs. I mean, some Murlocs you just don't really want to discover, right? So, I'm not sure about this one. I don't expect this to see play. Again, maybe occasionally in a Murloc Shaman, but that's about it. 7 mana 5/6 Beast Battlecry, adapt, then adapt. This one is funny. So adapt is one of the new keywords. Adapt gives you a variety of things you can choose from, including +3 attack, +3 health, stealth until the next turn, divine shield, taunt, +1/+1. A 7 mana 5/6 with double adapt. As cute as that is, probably not good enough. I don't know. The thing here is really we haven't played with the adapt mechanic yet. It is incredibly difficult, I think, to judge this card properly. This card can, in my opinion, be insanely powerful, but also complete garbage. And that depends on how the adapt mechanic ends up playing out, you know. For example, one thing I don't know is adapt and then adapt. Can you adapt the same thing twice? So if I select health the first time around, is there a chance I get health again? Because that changes everything, and I'm not sure how that works. So the Volcanosaur, I think, is a card that probably not. 7 mana is just a lot of mana, and as such, it's gonna be tricky to, you know, like, do that. It's likely just a filler. It's probably not going to see play. It, however, will be funny in Wild, where you have Bran, and then you Bran and Volcanosaur and adapt 4 times, and you got a huge ass dragon dude who then gets hexed. Glacial Shard, 1 mana 2/1 elemental that has Battlecry, freeze an enemy. This card will see play in elemental decks. It is very powerful, just like Firefly. It allows you to make sure that in the next turn you can actually get that big elemental effect. A card that will, you know, I guess kind of combo with the legendary. Glacial Shard is a really solid card. It's just a 1 mana 2/1, feels nice to play even on turn 1, right? If you're going second, your opponent already played a minion, just freeze it. All of a sudden it feels like you got the initiative. If you're playing against aggressive decks, you can use that to just freeze a Doomguard or a Korkron Elite, and then, you know, next turn play your 3/5 with Divine Shield and Taunt. All around, Glacial Shard is, I think, a really solid card that, if elemental decks exist, will see play in them. Absolutely, as a kind of a combo enabler, and also just a nice small body that can do a little bit of something. Now we're getting to the class cards. We've got a Druid, 5 mana 5/4 Battlecry, adapt. Beast, this card is not good, will not see play. I guess maybe a Beast Druid. No, Beast Druid has never been a thing. Beast Druid will not start being a thing now. Yeah, this card, I think, exists only to showcase the adapt mechanic, right? They just wanted to have a card that has simply adapt, right? That's it. That's all it does. It just adapts. And they needed, you know, that card to showcase the adapt mechanic. And so I think Verdant Longneck is that card. If you get health on it, then it's a 5 mana 5/7, which is slightly better than, you know, just a vanilla minion, but it's chance based, and sometimes you don't get that, and then you're just kind of screwed. This card is not better than just a, what is it called, Pit Fighter. It's less consistent, but it showcases adapt, and I think that's what it's about. So yeah, this next one just got released today. 5 mana Living Mana. Transform your mana crystals into 2/2 minions. Recover the mana when they die. So the way this works is you play it, and then all of the mana you have gets transformed into 2/2 minions, which means if let's say you have 5 mana, you play this on curve, then all of your mana gets removed. You don't have any mana anymore, and then you have 5 treants in play, which these treants all have the Death Rattle of gain an empty mana crystal. The thing is, gain an empty mana crystal is bad, right? So Living Mana, I think, might be worthwhile if the Death Rattle was gain a mana crystal, so that on your turn you could choose to trade them into your opponent and refill your mana again and then play something new. However, as it stands, gain an empty mana crystal means that your opponent can just leave them, completely denying you your next turn. If you play it on turn 5, then the next turn you will have 1 mana. Now, of course, you can play it on turn 10, or 9, I guess works too. On turn 9, you will lose 7 mana crystals, which then leaves you with 2. You will refresh 1 next turn, which means you have 3, and then, of course, you can Savage Roar for the kill. That is, of course, the big combo you're trying to go for, but even that is just going to be so inconsistent. Like, very, very inconsistent. Now, of course, your opponent has to deal with those treants you summoned. If they kill them on their turn, then, you know, you get all of your mana back and nothing happened. In that circumstance, this card is actually reasonably powerful. Now, I don't think this card will see play in tournaments, because it is a card that gets hard countered by Mass Dispel. You play this, you have your treants in play, all of which have, Death Rattle, gain an empty mana crystal. Your opponent plays Mass Dispel, you lose the game right then and there. That is not good, alright? As such, it is a very risky card that if you ever go up against a priest that happens to run Mass Dispel, and by the way, I personally don't think Mass Dispel is that bad of a card. I think Mass Dispel, especially in a meta like we are probably going to have with Journey to Ungor, where you have Adapt running around, you have Elementals running around, all of these cards that have pretty okay-ish, I don't know, not great vanilla stats, but have effects acquired through card text. Mass Dispel will be pretty powerful, you just purge all of that shit off. So having living mana be, just Mass Dispelled is going to be an absolute disaster, and as such I don't expect this card to see play. It will be funny in meme decks, and also there is a possibility of being, a very aggressive, a high-tempo ladder deck, right? So again, I don't expect to see this in tournament, but in like a high-aggressive ladder deck, you can use the living mana as like a huge token generation thing, where if your opponent leaves them alive, you're actually just threatening lethal because you were so aggressive in the early game. In that scenario, living mana can actually be reasonably powerful. It is a very gimmicky card. My prediction is that this card will not see play, but I would not be incredibly surprised to be proven wrong. It has potential given the right circumstances, given the right meta, but that is a lot of conditions for this card to be good. Swamp King Dread, the hunter legendary that likes to slaughter murlocs. After your opponent plays a minion, attack it, 7 mana 9/9 beast. 7 mana 9/9 is of course really good. That's amazing stats. And after your opponent plays a minion, attack it. Honestly, a mid-range hunter would probably play this. Look, the thing is, this thing is just so ridiculously overstated that I just don't know why you wouldn't play it. Right, in a lot of hunter decks, hunter decks that are not just super in your face, try to kill your opponent, Swamp King Dread is just an easy inclusion. Because on 6 you play Highmane, on 7 you play Swamp King Dread. Right, okay, think about this curve, right? So 1 mana, whatever. 2 mana, you play your Elk. Turn 3, you play your Rat Pack. Turn 4, you Houndmaster the Rat Pack. Turn 5, you do whatever, you like Animal Bite and Hero Power or whatever. Turn 6, Highmane. Turn 7, Swamp King Dread. Turn 8, Highmane again. Turn 9, you play Call of the Wild. You just win, right? Like you just win. It doesn't matter what a deck your opponent is playing. Doesn't matter what class they are. You just won. Swamp King Dread is overstated as all hell, has a reasonably powerful effect that, yes, can be a detriment, but unless your opponent plays poison, which nobody ever plays poison, you just have a big-ass dude that will do damage. Swamp King Dread is good, and it will see play. In mid-range hunter decks, I would absolutely put one of those in my mid-range hunter deck. And yeah, Swamp King Dread is he's just so overstated. That's the thing. Like, he's a 7 mana 9/9. That's a lot of stats. And here we go with the Hunter quest. The Marsh Queen revealed today. Quest, play 7 1-cost minions. Reward Queen Carnassa. Queen Carnassa is a 5 mana 8/8 beast that has a battle cry. Shuffle 15 raptors into your deck. This card, of course, is super scary. The raptors are 1 mana 3/2 beasts that have battle cry, draw a card. Now let's go ahead and dissect that from the back. All right. So the 1 mana 3/2 battle cry, draw a card is broken as fuck. If that card actually existed, it would be played a 2-off in every single deck in existence. It is so broken. It is so good. So those guys are spooky and scary, and I'm terrified of them. Queen Carnassa as a 5 mana 8/8 is pretty powerful as well. Now the condition to get these is play 7 1-cost minions. Now I kind of spent a little while thinking about this. Now first of all, you need to play them. Summoning doesn't work. So Alley Cat, only one. only counts as one, right? Summon is if it said summon and you could play Alley-Cat and get 2, but it says play, so you can only get 1 out of Alley-Cat. Now, let's say, hypothetically speaking, you build a deck of only consisting only of 1-drops. So your plan is to only play 1-drops, get the quest done as soon as possible, since you always start with the quest if you want to. So your turn 1 would be play the quest, and then you only play 1-drops, and on turn 5 you hopefully play the queen. The thing about that is, it only works if you go second. If you go first, you don't actually draw enough cards to play the queen on turn 5. You would have to play her on turn 6, because you don't draw enough cards. So that's kind of a problem, right? And there's really nothing you can do around that. So that super gimmicky deck of only 1-drops actually only works if you're going second, because if you're going second, you can draw enough 1-drops to play the queen on turn 5, and then play all of the raptors going forward. That is actually a somewhat funny idea that I quite appreciate. Right, I think that's actually a really cool idea, but it is so incredibly inconsistent, and sometimes, like, if you don't go second, the deck just is shit. A more realistically speaking deck would actually just run, I don't know, like 12 1-drops, 14 maybe, and then, a bunch of other cards, some Rat Packs, some Houndmasters, and most importantly, is it called the Chandra Rhino? Maybe that's a different one. The 5-mana, 2/5 beast that gives all beasts charge. That is a more realistic version of that deck, and I honestly think that version of the deck is still incredibly scary. The thing about the Marsh Queen quest, the cards you get out of it as a reward are just terrifying, absolutely terrifying. However, you have to completely butcher your deck in deck building to make this quest work. There's also a new card called the Tolvir Warden. A 5-mana 3/5, Battlecry, draw 2 1-cost minions from your deck. Now this guy, I think, works really well in that second style of deck I mentioned, right? Where you have, 14 1-drops, and then you play 2 of these, you play some charging, buffing dudes, you play Houndmasters, and probably 2 high mains, because high main is broken as shit. In that deck, I can actually see this guy really having an impact. And that's probably going to be the version of the deck that is more consistent, we'll see more of. Getting to Mage now, we got the Arcanologist, a 2-mana 2/3 Battlecry, draw a secret from your deck. This would see play in Reno Mage if Reno Mage was still a thing. If for some reason Kazakus Mage survives, then yes, Arcanologist will see play. Freeze Mage, of course, was mostly moved to Wild, so since in Wild there's Mad Scientist, which is just better than this card, maybe not, right? But there's always the chance for actually some sort of secret mage deck taking off. Nah, secret mage is not a thing, but it could well be. I don't know. This effect is actually pretty powerful, right? It's a 2-mana 2/3 Battlecry, draw a card. That's how you have to think of it, and that's pretty fucking neat. Right, now talking about secrets, we have Mana Bind, a 3-mana secret. When your opponent casts a spell, add a copy to your hand that costs 0. This card is interesting. It is a very specific tech card. This is the kind of card you, again, would see in Reno Mage, if Reno Mage was still a thing. Seeing as it isn't, it's probably not going to be commonly played. I think in most circumstances, as a mage, you're not so much centered on your opponent, you're more centered on your own thing, right? If you think about all of the mage archetypes, there's, just good old Freeze Mage, which didn't give a shit about what your opponent was doing, was just trying to get to the cards and then burst your opponent down. Then, of course, there's Reno Mage, same deal there. Then you have Tempo Mage, same deal there. Mana Bind would just be kind of a worse counterspell. Not really, not even that. It's not even a worse counterspell. It's just, I don't know. It can be really powerful. It can be incredibly powerful. The problem with it is that it has the same play around as counterspell, which is play a cheap, useless spell first to check if it's counterspell. With Mana Bind, well, okay, now they checked for Counterspell and Mana Bind. Turns out it was Mana Bind, and well, now you got their bad, useless spell. Sometimes this card can win you a game. You know, let's say you get a Call of the Wild from a Hunter. Yeah, that's huge, but how often will that happen? Probably not going to see play. Too inconsistent, I think, and not necessarily something Mage wants. The Mage Legendary is a 2-mana 2/2 called Pyrus, which Death Rattle return this to your hand as a 6-mana 6/6. And then that 6-mana 6/6 has the same Death Rattle, except return this to your hand as a 10-mana 10/10. All of these are elementals. This card, I think, might see play if there is a Nosov Mage somehow. I mean, maybe. Other than that, it somehow functions as an elemental. Of course, the elemental mechanic needs you to play elementals ahead of time. Pyrus allows you to basically always have an elemental that you can play ahead of time, which is somewhat nice. The problem with Pyrus is just that it's slow, and the Pyrus card itself is really bad. Right, a 2-mana 2/2 is bad, a 6-mana 6/6 is bad, and a 10-mana 10/10 is bad. These are just all not good. And that's a problem with Pyrus. If Pyrus had better stats, we would probably see it, but as it stands right now, I don't think so. My camera's battery died, so if the lighting is a little bit different, that's why. Next card is a 2-mana mage spell called Flame Geyser. Deals 2 damage, adds a 1/2 elemental into your hand. That seems reasonable, right? This card can definitely be useful, I think. 2 damage isn't amazing, but 2 damage is fine, right? Even 1 damage can be nice enough. If you look at something like Mortal Coil, we can definitely get value out of that. And Flame Geyser kind of works in the same way. Right, you can play that, and then you have your elemental, which costs 1 mana, and you can use to, go ahead and combo your other elemental cards. As already mentioned earlier, these 1 mana elementals are going to be somewhat necessary for elemental decks, and as such, I think Flame Geyser, or however you pronounce that, should be a reasonable card. Next up, we have a 2-mana 2/2 Murloc Hydrologist. Battlecry, discover a secret. Honestly, I don't think this card is going to be very good. Secret Paladin didn't really rely on playing the secret, right? It relied on summoning them out of your deck. Then you also have the fact that Murloc Paladin is no longer a thing with the rotation. And all of a sudden, this card is just a 2-mana 2/2, which allows you to play a bad additional card, which is what most Paladin secrets are. I don't think this card will see play. It's just not that powerful. Dino Size is kind of funny. It's an 8-mana spell, sets a minion's attack and health to 10. Of course, since it's 8 mana, you can at turn 10 do a small time recruit and then turn it into a Dino Size recruit, which isn't that powerful. 10 mana 10/10 isn't that good. However, what is powerful about this is you can use it on turn 8, you have a minion in play, you dino-size them and then just rush them down with the new 10/10 you acquired. That is very powerful, undeniably so. It's just its mana cost is so high, and it's not really a reliable finisher, right? Control decks usually have very specific cards they want to use to end a game, and Dino-size I don't think is specific enough of an effect to fit that criteria. I can maybe see a one-off of this in some sort of aggressive, not really aggro, more like mid-range paladin list, if that comes into existence. But seeing as we don't know the paladin quest yet, all of that is kind of hard to predict. Now, if I had to make a call, I think the paladin quest is going to be something involving Silverhand recruits. That's because on stream, one of the developers stated that there will be Silverhand recruit synergies, and the quest is kind of the obvious choice there, right? And if you can, through the quest, spawn a ton of Silverhand recruits, there's also a new card called Lost in the Jungle, which summons 2 1/1 Silverhand recruits for 1 mana. With those cards, in the quest, hopefully you can flood the board a lot, have a lot of minions there. And then the Dino Size might actually be pretty scary, right? So I don't think Dino Size fits in any existing archetypes, but I can definitely see value in the card, and I wouldn't be too surprised if it ends up being valuable in the new Paladin decks to come. Now, the next card I want to talk about is the Sunkeeper Tarim, the Paladin Legendary. 6 mana, 3/7 taunt, set all other minions attack and health to 3. This card I don't think is very good based on what we currently know. Again, in the new set, there might be a lot of Silverhand Recruit synergy. In that scenario, I can see this card being very powerful. Let's assume you manage to get 6 Silverhand Recruits on the field by turn 6. Then you play the Sunkeeper, and all of a sudden, all of your Silverhand Recruits are 3/3s. Similar to Quartermaster. Now, that is powerful, and that is something that is definitely a valuable effect. However, the problem with the card is simply if you're going up against aggro decks will actually be happy about this sort of effect. A lot of aggro decks rely on smaller minions. You play this on turn 6, you just buff them and then you lose. Alright, a Sunkeeper Tarim, of course, has the advantage of being a 3/7 taunt. So, in theory, he should trade into 3 of your opponent's minions. However, you also have to keep in mind, it's very likely that Priest will be a significant part of this expansion, and then there's also, of course, always Shadow Word Pain, which just kills the guy. Sunkeeper Tarim is something I think, again, given the current information, probably not very powerful, but it has potential in the future. Again, we don't know the Paladin quest yet, and if it does allow us to spawn a shit ton of Silverhand Recruits, then this card can actually be quite valuable. Talking about Priests, we got Awaken the Makers. The Priest quest summons 7 Death Rattle minions, reward Amara, Warden of Hope, which is a 5 mana 8/8 that sets your health to 40. Now, of course, this was the quest that they announced at the beginning because they just wanted to show the absurdity of the quest, which shows us how insane this effect is. It's very powerful, setting your health to 40, 5 mana, 8/8. I mean, everything about this is crazy, right? Of course, the condition is summon 7 Death Rattle minions, which I don't think is that hard to hit, especially that we are considering we already have 2 new Death Rattle minions given to us. The first one being, of course, the Tortolan Shellracer, 4 mana, 2/6 taunt. Death Rattle, give a random friendly minion +1/+1. And then we also have the Crystalline Oracle, a 1 mana, 1/1 elemental with Death Rattle. Copy a card from your opponent's deck and add it to your hand. We have seen this effect before, and it was powerful then. It is still powerful now, especially on a 1 mana minion. I think Priest will definitely have a very viable Priest class, quest deck. I'm not sure. I'm sure Crystalline Oracle will see play. I'm not too sure about the Turtle. That one doesn't really have super amazing stats, which is the issue. If it had just, 3 attack, then for sure. But with 2, I doubt it a little bit. Nonetheless, Priest will definitely have a viable Death Rattle deck, especially considering Nosov is still in the game. So Priest has the easiest deck to build ever, right? You slap in a bunch of good Death Rattles, you put in a quest, you put in Nosov, and you are terrifying. That is just absolutely insane. Even with the loss of Sylvanas, that deck will still be incredible. And as such, that quest is definitely going to be powerful, and Priest will definitely be powerful. A 3 mana 2/3 Mirage Caller. Battlecry, choose a friendly minion, summon a 1/1 copy of it. An important thing to keep in mind about the Priest quest is that it states summon 7 Death Rattle minions, which means Nosov counts towards it, and Mirage Caller counts towards it. As such, this effect is pretty powerful in those decks. Now, the stats are really not that great, but they're not terrible, right? They are reasonable and enough, I think, for this card to find a place occasionally. It's just a shame that in the early game, you always need to be ready, right? Hearthstone, again, is a very aggressive game. It has traditionally been an aggressive game. And as such, you need to have plays available to you in the early game that actually allow you to build some tempo. And Mirage Caller, very unlikely you actually get to play it on turn 3. And I don't know, right? More often than not, this card will not be great against aggressive decks, and then you're struggling a little bit. So it can be valuable, but I think it's inconsistent, and I expect it to not see too much play. So Yeah, it's a little bit iffy. It depends on how fast the meta is, but my current assumption is it's going to have some very aggressive decks in there, and then the Mirage Caller will just not be able to do much. A 2-mana spell called Shadow Visions was also announced. Discover a copy of a spell in your deck. This is funny. You can use it for combos, of course. You can duplicate spells all over the place. Shadow Visions, of course, works best if you only play 3 other spells in your deck. Or actually, I guess, only 2 other spells if you want to guarantee that you get one of those. You can do combinations like Mind Blast, right? Like you just kind of Mind Blast people a lot. You can get all kinds of stuff. It's a very interesting card, very gimmicky. Something I think, again, is hard to predict if it's going to be good in the future, but it definitely has the potential to be a combo deck of sorts, right? I think there's definitely a chance for a combo deck coming into existence, although those are really hard to predict. And an interesting card, likely going to stay just a gimmick, but again, I can see potential there. The next card is very, very interesting. Not because it's good, I don't think it is, but because of the things it introduces. So, a 3-mana 3/3, Curious Glimmerroot. Battlecry, look at 3 cards, guess which one started in your opponent's deck to get a copy of it. So the way this works is you play it, then you get a discover effect. You see 3 cards. And 2 of those, I assume, are randomly decided. And then 1 of them is out of your opponent's deck. Then you have to guess which one is out of their deck. I gotta be honest with you. I think this guessing game is gonna be relatively simple. However, in that scenario, it is still essentially a 3-mana 3/3. Get a random card from your opponent's deck. Which is fine, I guess. Right? It's not an amazing effect. It's not terrible either. It's like right there in the middle. Now, sadly, it's not a death rattle. If it was a death rattle, this will probably see play as a battle cry. A little unlikely. Not sure, right? Like, maybe not. We'll have to wait and see. However, the interesting thing about this is it introduces a lot of new text, I guess, right? We have never had look at 3 cards. That is not a text that has existed before. Something that also hasn't existed before is guess which one. That is something we haven't had yet. And then started in your opponent's deck, also something we haven't had yet. These 3 separate little parts of this card text are really interesting because they open up the possibility of them using this text for different cards in the future, and that's very interesting. It's clearly a card that is mostly meant to be experimental, but I think it's experimental in a good way. Like, it's a card you want to play only after you've figured out what archetype, what deck your opponent is playing, and then based on that you can guess which one it is, although it can still be a little bit random at times, right? You never know for sure, and sometimes, let's say you're playing against a controlled warrior and you're presented with an Acolyte of Pain, a Revenge, and a Whirlwind. Well, it could be all 3, right? Some controlled warriors don't play Whirlwind and Revenge. Others don't play Acolyte of Pain, right? You don't know for sure. And so it can be a little bit random. And that's a little bit of a problem. That's why I don't think this will see play. But it is an interesting effect, and I think it's something I'm excited to see what they want to do with in future expansions. Let's get to one of the most interesting cards in the entire set. The Caverns Below, the Rogue Quest. Play 4 minions with the same name, and the reward is a Crystal Core, which the Crystal Core is a 5-mana artifact. Is that what the new thing is? Like, it's one of those effects that you cannot remove, it just stays in play, but it takes up one of the minion spots, right? The Crystal Core makes it so that for the rest of the game, your minions are 5/5, which is something people have had confusion about. Essentially, how this works is any minion you play will be played as a 5/5. It can still take damage, right? It's not always going to be 5/5, as in it is invulnerable. No, it can still take damage. It can still get destroyed. You just play them as 5/5s. Now, the condition for this quest is to play 4 minions with the same name. This is something that is going to be difficult, right? It's going to be easier in Wild, because in Wild you have Gang Up. Gang Up, a card that is rotating out, and as such, it's not as easy to just play Gang Up on a minion and shovel, free morph it into your deck, and then you can play those. No, what we now have to do is Shadow Stab, Vanish, use the Brewmasters and that little Ferryman to go and get those cards. There's also Fizzlety and a new card introduced in the set called the Mimic Pod, which draws a card and then adds a copy of it into your hand. Now, I don't know if this is good, and the Hearthstone developers themselves said that it's really hard to predict if this card is going to be good or not. It's better if you don't make any assumptions right now. So I'm going to go ahead and make some assumptions. The thing is that playing 4 minions with the same name is possible, and I don't even think it is that difficult. However, it does require time, and it does require you to not do much for a while, right? It's essentially a combo deck, because what you need to do is you need to pick a minion, first of all, right? Let's say you have a Stone Tusk Boar, which is probably a good choice for it, or Wisp, right? So this is a minion that you have, and you decide this is the minion I'm going to play 4 times. So what you never want to do is have that minion just stay and play. What you always want to do is you want to play it and then Brewmaster it back into your hand. Play it, Shadow Step it. Always make sure you get it back into your hand. You don't want to rely on drawing it, right? You don't want to rely on hopefully Fizzleteeing it or Mimic Podding it. You want to always do the Shadow Stepping mechanic of getting it back into your hand. And that is going to take a while. That is going to be difficult to properly complete. And as such, it is really a mechanic that I find, while interesting, it's probably going to be very hard to hit. Very hard to hit. Especially against the aggro decks. I expect them to just kill you ahead of time. Another important thing to keep in mind about this quest is that as Rogue, you, traditionally speaking, have never wanted just big bodies. Well, somewhat, right? You want huge bodies. You want 10 10s and 12 12s. You want Questing Adventurer and Edwin Van Cleave to be enormous. And then you conceal them and run them into your opponent's face. Or, of course, you play you play Gazajan Auctioneer and you just cycle through your deck and burst your opponent down with a bunch of spells. But traditionally speaking, Rogue has been all about spells, and the few minions they have played were either enormous, potentially, or just kind of regular size. I mean, the biggest minion a Rogue deck plays is Tomb Pillager, and that's just a 5/4. Why do you want your minions to be 5/5s, and what minions do you want to be 5/5s? Are you gonna start playing Stone Tusk Boars or Wisps, or I don't know, right? Like, that's really the difficult question there, and I don't really have an answer. This is such a weird quest, and we all just have to see how it plays out. Talking about weird things, Shirasin Corpse Flower, a 4-mana 5/3 with a Death Rattle, go dormant. Play 4 cards in a turn to revive this minion. Now I have a question, how does Nasoth work with this? If I play Nasoth and I've revived this a few times, do I just get like 3 or 4 more of them? Is that how it works? Can I Faceless Manipulator, the dormant version of the card? I don't know. Right, like, that's pretty important. Play 4 cards in a turn to revive this minion. That's a lot, right? It would be a really strong card if it was just play 4 cards to revive this minion, but you need to play them in 1 turn, which as Rogue is definitely doable. The problem is just how often. Right? How often can you do this? Because you're gonna run out of resources pretty fucking quickly. So, the thing is just that you have to invest a lot of resources to make this work, and then it's not that strong. Then it's just a 5/3, right? I think this card is, again, an experimental card, a card that is just kind of like, you know what, like, we'll see how that plays out, we'll see what they can do with it. Another interesting thing about it, though, is actually with the quest, because then it turns it into a 5/5. However, you cannot just rest this dude 4 times and make that count for the quest. Doesn't work that way, sadly, because that would be a summon, not a play. Nonetheless, I think this card is mostly a gimmick. I don't really expect to see it in competitive decks. There might be some sort of way to make it work, but it just isn't powerful enough. I don't think so to build a deck around. If it had a charge, if it had taunt, if it had anything other than just being a 5/3, maybe. But it doesn't. It's just some bad stats, and well, then you end up with some bad stats. That's it, right? You're better off just playing 2 Yetis. And that kind of tells you that it's not that great. I don't know. We already talked about the Mimic Pot a little bit. Draw a card, then add a copy of it to your hand. A card that I think is quite interesting. It's just card draw at 3. Right, at 3 mana, you have a spell that draws you 2 cards. That's pretty common. It's just a rogue version. It's probably going to see some play. I don't see why not. It seems reasonable enough. Like, I don't even think it's super reliant on the quest to see play. It just seems really solid. And there's a lot you can get that would be very powerful, you know, Mimic Pod, and you get another preparation that would be strong. You know, you get a second Edwin that would be insane. There's a lot you can get from this that might be really, really powerful. So, yeah. Vile Spine Slayer, a 5 mana 3/4 minion with combo destroy a minion. This we might see a one-off in a few decks, but I don't really think so. Honestly, Rogue has Zap, which is better than almost any other removal in the game. And they have Assassinate, which nobody plays, and it's just 5 mana destroy a minion without a condition. If Assassinate was 5 mana destroy a minion combo summon a 3/4, it might see play, possibly, but probably still not. And that is just a strictly better version of this card. So, yeah, I'm a little doubtful. We'll have to wait and see, but it's definitely something I'm questioning a lot. It might see play in that minion-centered deck, though, right? It might see play in the whole new quest rogue archetype where you cycle, you know, like you recycle your minions over and over again, play them over and over again. In that deck, you want to play a lot of minions so you can use the Crystal Core properly. And in that scenario, this dude as a 5 mana 5/5 with combo destroy a minion, that actually is a very different deal. That I can get on board with. So maybe a one-off in that deck, maybe a one-off in some sort of other rogue. I can see it as that. I don't expect to see too much of it though, just because its stats and its condition are just on the lower end of powerful. We're getting to Shaman, the big one. Everybody wants to know about Shaman because Shaman has been broken for a little while. It's Quest, Unite the Murlocs. Quest, summon 10 Murlocs, reward Megafin. Keyword there, summon. So call in the finishers, summon 4 Murlocs, gets you almost half the way there for 1 card. That's pretty fucking sick. Right, so you build a Murloc deck and then you get Megafin. What is Megafin? Megafin is a 5 mana 8/8 Murloc with a battle cry, fill your hand with random Murlocs. So you play this guy, you just got 10 cards all of a sudden, all of them are Murlocs, which you can then use to swarm your opponent. Honestly, I think with this Murloc Shaman seems to be reasonable, right? You have Finley, of course. Finley is, wait, not Finley, Finja. Oh god, stupid puns, right? But you got Finja. Finja is very, very powerful. I mean, there is that deck Brian Kibler played for a little while with the whole, you know, everything is awesome now. No, is it everything is awesome? Yeah. I can never remember which one it is, but the Shaman one that, you know, gives all of your minions +2/+2 and costs 1 less for each Murloc you have in play. You know, Brian Kibler played a deck with that and Colin the Finisher and, Finja and the Finja package. That can be pretty powerful. Finja in general, I think, is actually what's going to carry this deck. Finja is so good. And important thing, again, you need to summon the Murlocs, you don't have to play them. So the minions you get from Finja do count. The Murlocs you get from Finja, they do count towards the quest. And as such, I think Murloc Shaman we will probably see. It's just Megafin is really good, right? Because Murlocs run out of resources. That's their weakness. That's why they suck. But with Megafin, you play Megafin, you have infinite Murlocs again, right? You just run your opponent down. That can be pretty powerful. If we think back to Neptulon, a card that didn't see that much play, but it did occasionally, and honestly, Neptulon gave you, I believe, 4 Murloc cards. That was actually pretty powerful, right? Like, the thing is, when you played Neptulon, you could feel its power. Now, another thing, Megafin, there are a lot of very powerful Murlocs. So you could get another Finger, right? If you get another Finger, all of a sudden, like, that is such a huge swing turn, right? Also, of course, he benefits from all of the other Murloc buffs. He is a Murloc himself, an 8/8. That's pretty spooky. So this whole Murloc aggro shaman thing probably going to be a thing now, right? I would be surprised if it's not. It just seems too powerful to not be. And if you think about, like, can you reasonably do this? Can you fulfill the conditions for this quest? Yes, very easily. In fact, you can do it on curve. Let's assume you're going second. You play, turn 1 your quest. Turn 2, you just play the 2 mana that summons another Murloc. Right, so you have 2 Murlocs there, turn 3, call in the finishers, turn 4, call in the finishers, turn 5, Megafin. Yes, of course, that's the dream, but it is possible, and that's a little bit scary. Shamans also got Elementals, Kalimos, Primal Lord. If you played an Elemental last turn, cast an Elemental Invocation. It's an 8 mana 7/7. No Overlord on that, which is surprising. Shamans usually are stuck with a lot of Overlord. But sure. And those invocations are deal 3 damage to all enemy minions, restore 12 health to your hero, fill your board with 1/1 elementals, or deal 6 damage to the enemy hero. The thing about this card as an 8 mana 7/7, if it did any of these cards as, or any of these effects as kind of, like a random effect and stuff like that, it would just be bad. But the thing about this card is it gives you the options, or it gives you choice, and that's really good. Alright, Kalimos Primal Lord, while it may not see play in every deck, and it won't, in an elemental deck, absolutely you'll put him in, because he just brings so much utility to the board, like deal 3 damage to all enemy minions is very good. That's a very powerful effect. Restore 12 health to your hero is yet again a pretty solid effect. Fill your boards with 1/1 elementals is not that great, but deal 6 damage to the enemy hero also not that great. You're gonna go with the first 2, but the thing is that you will get the choice, and that is what makes this card powerful, right? It's just you can adjust to the situation. If you are on the initiative, you can play him and fill up your board and be an Onyxia, right? Or you can play him to heal yourself if you're behind against the control deck, you're worried about being burst down by the mage. Or if you go behind against, like more of like a tempo, mid-rangey Murloc Shaman, for example, and you deal 3 damage across the board and clear everything. That is pretty powerful, right? And you can even use him as a fireball. He is something that will see play in elemental decks. Another good thing about him is he is yet again an elemental with the elemental condition, which is always very powerful. So in theory, you can play him and then the 9 mana 5/10 taunt if you insist on playing that guy. We've got a 5 mana spell, Volcano. Deal 15 damage randomly split among all minions, overload 2. This card will see play in control shaman lists. Jade Shaman will likely run a copy of this. This card is just good. A lot of people, I think, underestimate how powerful it is because there's that Warlock card that deals, I think, 10 damage randomly split amongst all characters, which is not the same thing as Volcano. Volcano ignores heroes, so in fact you can use Volcano to remove a Visera. That is something you can do against aggro decks. Do they have 15 health in play? Well, fuck them up, right? You don't have a minion in play because they removed all of your shit and they're still rushing you down. You play Volcano, clear everything. Volcano is very powerful. There's no doubt in my mind that we'll see Volcano in competitive decks, usually as a one-off probably. It is the kind of effect that you only want to use once a game, not twice, but it is strong. And the important thing about it is it brings utility into the late game. Late game, they play, some Jade or something, they have a 10/10 in play. Volcano can not only clear the early game threats, Volcano can also clear the late game threats, given the right circumstances. Now, it is a dead card if you have the board advantage yourself. In that case, you don't want to play it, but that's why you only want to play a one-off, right? That's why you'll still play your Lightning Storms, that's why you'll still play your Maelstrom Portals. It's just that Volcano is an alternative if you are behind. And I expect to see this card in competitive. 7 mana 4/4, turning the meme on its head. Stone Sentinel and an Elemental with an Elemental effect. Summon 2/2/3 Elementals with Taunt. We'll probably see play in Elemental decks. It is an elemental that you can again use to curve into other elementals, which is awesome. So you can use, turn 6 you play whatever, turn 7 you play your Stone Sentinel, then turn 8 you play the Shaman Legendary, turn 9 you play your 5/10 whatever. You see how that 5/10 just doesn't seem that impressive? Right? Like, that's what I mean. But anyway, the Stone Sentinel, the problem is that two free elementals with taunt isn't that amazing. It's not that strong if we compare it to something like the Druid Legendary, the 9-mana 5/8, which summons 2/2/2 treants. A big part about that card is always having the body actually be able to do things. The 2/2s don't actually tend to buy that much space. They just sit there, block 2 hits, and then you can use the 5/8 to actually remove and fight. Stone Sentinel has a weaker body himself. I still expect us to see play in the elemental lists as, like kind of a late game elemental, but not because of its immense power. It is powerful, it is not game-breakingly powerful though, but mostly because it is an elemental that benefits from other elementals, and that is powerful in of itself. The Warlock quest, Lakari Sacrifice, discard 6. The Warlock quest is Lakari Sacrifice, discard 6 cards, and then as a reward you get a Never Portal, which Never Portal is a 5-mana spell that opens a permanent portal that summons 3/2 imps. These 3/2 imps come 2 at a time, which is pretty powerful, and every turn you'll get 2 3/2 imps. That is very, very strong. If you get to that stage, you'll just overwhelm your opponent, especially considering this card will be played in, more aggressive Warlock decks. Warlock tends to, like the discard mechanic is used aggressively. With the little guy that every time you discard a card, you get to draw a card, Doom Guards are going to be in that deck. The discard mechanic is something that Warlock can already use. Discard Warlock is already a thing. It is not a top tier competitive deck, but it is a deck and it can be pretty spooky. As such, this condition is rather easy to hit, especially if you consider there's the new Lakari Fellhound, which is a taunt 4-mana 3/8 demon, which discards 2 random cards. The stats, of course, are amazing for the cost, and it discards 2 cards, which is now a good thing. Especially, there's also the new Warlock Legendary, which is the Clutch Mother Savas, 2-mana 2/2 beast. Whenever you discard this, give it +2/+2 and return it to your hand. The Clutch Mother Savas is a card you want to have in your mulligan. Pretty much most of the time. I mean, in this Warlock deck is pretty draw reliant, right? So first of all, you'll get your quest in the beginning, right? So that's what you play turn 1, and then turn 2 you preferably want to go play discard effect and discard Clutch Mother Savas. Clutch Mother Savas will be necessary in these discard decks. I've seen voices say that you don't necessarily always want to play her. She's either amazing or she's terrible. Depends on how it actually plays out. I'm gonna go ahead and say Clutch Mother Savas will be necessary for these discard Warlock decks, simply because she has such immense value as a card you can repeatedly discard. That is the big thing. The thing about the discard mechanic, it doesn't count as a discard if you don't discard a card. If you play a Doomguard with an empty hand, it doesn't count as a discard of 2, it counts as a discard of 0. You actually want to end up discarding cards though. Clutch Mother Savas makes that possible. As such, Clutch Mother Savas will be a necessary requirement for this deck if you want to have the highest power level possible. Not only that, of course, it's a powerful card. It's very easy to play this as on turn 5 or 6 as an 8/8 or a 10/10 possibly, As such, yeah, I expect this card to see a lot of play. I think the whole discard Warlock deck, it was competitive, somewhat, not really. Let's be realistic. It wasn't competitive before then, but it was scary. If you played against the discard Warlock and they had a perfect curve, you lost. It's just scary. Right, and now it is going to be a competitively viable deck. It will be absolutely terrifying to go up against, bring back aggro Warlock. It will be an aggressive deck, and it's just something that will require 2 new legendaries though, which is a bit of an issue, but there's really nothing you can do about that. Another Warlock card is the Corrupting Mist, a 2-mana spell that corrupts every minion, destroy them at the start of your next turn. This card will not see play. A lot of people compared it to Doomsayer. Doomsayer is a card that serves somewhat a similar effect, right? You play it at the start of your next turn, you clear the entire board. The problem with Doomsayer is that it either, you know, like the I don't know, you play a Doomsayer, right? And what happens? Your opponent can clear it. Okay, in that case, Doomsayer got you 7 health, which is worst case scenario, which is already a pretty good scenario, right? The best case scenario is you play a Doomsayer, your opponent can't clear it. At that point, your opponent can't even play new things. That's what makes it so powerful. That's what makes Doomsayer so scary. Not only does the Doomsayer clear the board, but the Doomsayer denies your opponent the next turn. If you play Frostnova Doomsayer on a board, usually if your opponent doesn't have something ready to remove the Doomsayer, they just pass. They just don't have anything they can do because they can't play any new minions, since the Doomsayer will just clear it immediately. Corrupting Mist does not bring that same effect. Yes, it's a guarantee of clearing the board, but the thing is, well, you can still get value out of those minions. You can still trade if you want to. You can still, you know, just, I don't know, do something with them. I'm sure there's some sort of value you can get out of them. However, it does not give that effect of making your opponent pass your next turn. Corrupting Mist may be a one-off in like a wild Reno Warlock, but another thing that's important to keep in mind here is that with the new expansion, there will be less Control Warlock archetypes. Control Warlock will completely phase out of existence. There is no handlock with the Molten Giants not be getting unnerved, and there's no Reno Lock because Reno Lock requires Reno Jackson, and Reno Jackson will not be here anymore. As such, the Corrupting Mist, of course, doesn't fit into Discard Lock. Discard Lock is too aggressive for that, and Zoo, of course not. And what Control Warlock archetype is there? Currently, there isn't any. There may be one with the Elementals that we don't know of yet, but so far, Warlock hasn't gotten any Elementals, and it doesn't really fit with their theme either. But it just doesn't seem like the kind of thing a Warlock would get. As such, I don't think Corrupting Mist is very good, and I don't think it will see a lot of play. We've got a 1-mana 1/1 weapon called Molten Blade. Each turn this is in your hand, transform it into a new weapon. Honestly, I don't expect this to see play. It's just too random. There is, however, some merit to it. I'm not gonna completely disregard it because I assume it can transform into weapons from other classes. As such, there are some valuable weapons you could get there as a warrior. True Silver Champion is, of course, fantastic. That would be really, really powerful. There's even that what is it called? That I don't remember, that hunter weapon that makes you immune on your attack for 7 mana. That one might be good too. It's just that Warrior already has the best weapons in the game, probably, and as such, wouldn't you just want to play a Warrior weapon instead? Probably. So, it's likely not going to see play, maybe, but no. Good meow, Nikita. Well, we're almost done here. And we got Explore Ungoro, a 2-mana spell. Replace your deck with copies of Discover a Card. This is clearly just a troll card, or a Trollden card. It's a card meant for memery. I'm definitely going to build a deck with it just to have a fun time, but it's clearly not competitive, and it's not meant to be competitive, and that's perfectly fine. That about sums it up. That's gonna be my review of the Journey to Ungoro cards, at least the ones that have been revealed up to this point. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a rating on the video. I would definitely appreciate that. And please leave some feedback. Let me know what you think about the video. Let me know what you think about the new cards. If you think my kind of analysis was on point, or maybe it wasn't. Again, I want to make more Hearthstone content, and it's starting now, so get ready for that. I'll likely do some Hearthstone streams soon as well, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.